So welcome back to the final panel of this year's What's New in Brussels seminar. So glad to see that many of you could actually stay with us until the end, and we hope it's also because, as we do here, you find this a very interesting topic for exchanges. In a sense, I think we've deliberately left one of the hottest topics at the moment, I think, in European policies and practice for last, the topic of institutional collaboration. So we're going to touch upon in this final panel, obviously, on the important updates related to the European Universities Initiative and alliances, but also more broadly the topic of institutional collaboration and, more importantly, I think the topic of institutional transformations related to this collaboration. And we are again in very good company, I think, to have this conversation, a big topic to cover in not so much time. So I'll move straight to introducing our panelists, and I'll start with Vanessa Libier-Santon, who is Head of Unit for Higher Education, European Commission, more specifically Directorate for Education and Culture, or DG EAC, as I think we rather refer to the affiliation. Very, very important person behind and in front, I would say, of the European Universities Initiative, amongst others. And then we have Emmanuel Gardon, who is director of the Coimbra Group of Universities, one of the long-established networks of universities here in Brussels. And I'll continue with Peter Levens, who is a vice rector for international policy at the Catholic University of Leuven, or KU Leuven in short, here in Belgium. Also coordinator of Una Futura. We're going to hear more about Una Futura, I think, but also about Una Europa, which is one of the leading first wave European universities alliances. And last but not least, we have Juan Rayon Gonzalez, president of the European Erasmus Student Network, or ESN in short. Almost. You've probably heard him take the floor in some of the previous sessions, and obviously representing the student voice in our panel today. In terms of the format, just to warn you about what's coming, we have planned a number of exchanges between ourselves in the panel, but we'll also open up twice for questions and comments from your side. So stay tuned for that, and be ready to take the floor as well when the time comes. So let's get it started, and Vanessa, I will start with a question to you, also because, as you have seen in this year's What's New program, you're very familiar with our event. We often have you here and your colleagues. We're grateful for that. But we have started from this global perspective, and we looked at the important changes we see in terms of global cooperation due to geopolitical tensions right now. So that's been a main topic of discussions yesterday. So I'm curious to hear from you a bit, how does that apply to European universities alliances, without implying that alliances should now receive also objectives related to global cooperation. I think we're dealing with a framework where alliances have more and more policy objectives to respond to. At the same time, I'm curious, how does the European Commission see also the role of alliances in this increasingly complex geopolitical context? Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Irina. Indeed, not only European universities, but all higher education institutions in Europe have to face multiple crises. I will start with the COVID-19 crisis that has touched all of them, and it's admirable the way they have adapted so quickly. What we have seen in the context of the European universities alliances, that they were better equipped to be more resilient, because they had to move so quickly into an online teaching and learning that putting together everything that they had, within the alliance was allowed them, if you want, to have a much broader offer for their students, so they were more rapidly able to move quickly to this online environment, but also with all the offer that their students needed to keep continuing their studies. So we see that many of them, especially those from the first wave who have been hit directly by the crisis, they have reshuffled their work packages, they are moved quicker than what they have foreseen initially to set up a virtual transnational campus that is now continuing and that is continuing to be progressing. I can think about ECIU, but many other European universities as well. So that is one element. The second element that universities are facing is not only universities, but we are talking about universities today, is of course the aggression in Ukraine. So many higher education institutions are welcoming student staff from Ukraine. But what we hear a lot from the ministries, the Ukrainian ministries responsible for higher education, is that where the needs are, pressing needs, is to really in reinforcing the cooperation with higher education institutions in Europe for them to rebuild, reshape their higher education system. And we were very happy to see the commitment from a majority of European universities alliances to provide support and help their peers in Ukraine through many different formats. It can be to receive staff for a short period of time. Their universities do a job shadowing and explain what they are doing. It can take many different forms. So we were happy in the previous call last year that there were a number of Ukrainian universities associated to a number of alliances. We will see for the call that has just closed a few days ago, but I don't have the numbers, but we see that Ukrainian universities are also associated to a number of applications, which is very good news. Now, as associated partner, they do not receive direct EU funding. So that was a point that was raised by a number of alliances. I have good news for that. We have discussed with the Erasmus Plus Programme Committee. The European Parliament has supported the front-loading of Erasmus Plus budget from 2027 to 2023, which means that we're going to be able to increase the budget for the Erasmus Plus cooperation projects by 45%, specifically dedicated to provide this support to Ukrainian higher education institutions. So that means that the alliances having Ukraine as associate partners will be able to use this additional source of funding to fund their activities. There are two other points that I would like to raise. The second one objective is to facilitate the integration of the Western Balkan countries in a step-by-step approach through their participation, through facilitating their access step-by-step to centralized action. So we have started with the European Universities Call in 2023 so that any university from Western Balkan country can take as full partner participate in this initiative. So, and we have seen again in the call that has just closed, really mobilization from higher education institutions from the Western Balkans. So that's very good news. And last but not least, in this geopolitical context, our Commissioner, our President von der Leyen, has presented a few days ago a new communication on the Green Deal Industrial Plan to increase the competitiveness of European net zero industry. For that, we need talents, we need skills to develop the technologies where Europe, the EU, is lacking autonomy. We are very dependent on the US and China, so it's important that Europe can build up this autonomy. For this, they need skills and talents, especially in clean technologies, but not only any kind of new technologies, to accompany the green and digital transition. And here it's very important. We see that most of the European universities are very much mobilized in training and providing the skill that Europe needs. And last but not least, I would say in the geopolitical context, the importance of not only promoting but also protecting European values, academic freedom. And here I think it's very important, and that is one of the very important objectives of these alliances, which is really to work based on trust and based on shared values. So all in all, just to say that by putting their strengths all together, these alliances are becoming more and more attractive on the worldwide scene because they're partners abroad, but I'm sure Peter and Emmanuel will be able to explain that even better than me. But they're partners abroad, of course, it's fantastic for them because they will not only cooperate with KUL, but they will cooperate with all the partners of UNA Europa, and they will benefit from all the scientific knowledge and education knowledge there, which makes you even more attractive. And I will stop here. Thanks.
Thank you. So I think you've highlighted, and quite interestingly so, that without necessarily also in the context of alliances, without necessarily having a specific mandate or a policy goal to engage in a broader global context, we have already evidence of how alliances, but also institutions more broadly, responded to some of these emerging crises, utilizing existing European funding for that. So I think that's indeed good news. I think an element that also came up in yesterday's discussions was thinking more broadly about structured framework for corporations, how that important is to have that for the speed of response as well. So I've heard several colleagues that reflected back on their international collaborations more broadly, and how that enabled them having this more closer collaboration with specific partners actually respond and provide necessary support in real time and in a certain way. Emmanuel, turning to you now with a first question, because the Coimbra Group of Universities is one of the very established networks. It exists for almost 40 years, I counted, so you'll soon have an important anniversary. Within your membership, you have many universities that are participating also in other types of networks, including European Universities Alliances at the moment. So I was curious, what does that mean for the inner life of Coimbra Group as an organization and as a network? How has that changed the way you work, and how do your members, from your perspective, navigate these multiple identities that they probably bring to your corporation as well?
Thank you, Irina. So yeah, indeed, maybe just specifying that we are a network of comprehensive universities, so this is the perspective from which I will talk in this session, and I think it's important. Indeed, our members are usually involved in more than one traditional network, and most of them are now involved also in an alliance. Actually, 35 of our 41 members are involved in an alliance, and for those that are not involved, it's usually because they are in a country that cannot participate with funding to the program. So that represents 8 alliances across the Coimbra Group. And of course, this is one dimension, as you have just recalled, but because of the long-standing cooperation between our members, they are involved in multiple other types of transnational collaboration that transcend the knowledge square. So they are not involved only in transnational cooperation on higher education, but also in research and in other cases on also their engagement to society. We also have, for instance, a long-standing student inner network exchange. So plenty of collaborations, Erasmus Mundus programs, now some blended intensive programs between our members. And that transcends also the belonging to some members from different alliances are developing joint activities, BEEPs, Erasmus Mundus programs together, even if they are not in the same alliance, and this will continue for sure, there's no doubt about this. About how the European Universities Initiative has impacted the dynamics of our long-standing network, you might be surprised, but it's been very positive in a sense. So of course, we have seen in the past 3 years some tensions on resources, capacity to engage. We are a network with 12 working groups. This means that heads of international offices, academics in SSH, heads of research support offices regularly have meetings, develop joint activities together. And over these past 3 years, where the engagement in the alliances has been so intense and time-consuming, time-demanding for them, in our working groups, there can have been some tensions in capacity to attend meetings, capacity to engage in new activities, but we also work with the principle of variable geometry. So this has also happened in the past 30 years, 40 years, that other European initiatives impacted our cooperation, and it's not something new for us. The main impact has been that our members now come to these joint activities within the traditional network that is the Coimbra Group with the benefits or the doubts or the questions they have in their respective alliances. And this is extremely interesting because we form for them a trust-based environment where they feel comfortable to exchange about their obstacles, their doubts, etc. And our governance bodies, our executive board, our rectors are really insisting on this complementarity between the scope and the mandate of the traditional network, which is very broad. Our mission statement has never changed in these past 40 years because it's very broad, while at the same time members are engaged on a short time basis and very focused approach in their alliance. So we try as much as we can to bring the experience of the alliances to the Coimbra Group, but also vice versa. So for instance, to give very concrete examples and to relate to the international cooperation, we have a long-standing cooperation with Latin American partners. We have a memorandum of understanding with similar networks. And in December, and Peter next to me attended this event, we had joint meeting between vice rectors and rectors from these Latin American universities and our European universities in Montevideo, Uruguay. We included a session on the alliances. So our members involved in the alliances presented what they're doing in the alliance to their Latin American partners, and in view to envisage further steps of cooperation. So for us, it's I would say nothing has changed to a large extent for our network. It's more a mutually nurturing activity, but probably it's because precisely about because of this history, and thanks to this history, most of the alliances where our members are involved are formed by Coimbra Group members. EC2U is an alliance only formed by Coimbra Group members. CharmEU is mostly formed by Coimbra Group members. Una Europa, half of their members are from Coimbra Group. So it's also a certain type of alliance. It's not necessarily reflecting the diversity of all the alliances. Thank you very much.
Very interesting to hear. So overall, a positive impact. I think, as you've said it yourself, and I took forward also this idea of this variable geometry and how that's important in terms of flexibility on how to engage. You've already mentioned, yes, some tensions, inherent tensions, I think, especially related to resources, and that gets me to Peter, and the same question to you, but from the other perspective, from a university perspective, knowing that KU Leuven is active in multiple networks, leading also Una Europa. Is this a necessity, you think, from your perspective, this multiple participation for modern universities in different kinds of networks, and is this mutually sustaining to a certain degree, and what are some of the tensions that arise from your perspective?
Thank you, Irena, for this difficult question. I would not so much call it tensions, like Emanuela said, but rather opportunities. And of course, every opportunity comes with challenges, and these we have to overcome. But I think this question is extremely important. Actually, it's one of the issues we are dealing with, I would say, more or less on a yearly basis when we are at KU Leuven evaluating the engagement in the different university networks and alliances we are in. I stopped counting the number of alliances we have at KU Leuven, but it's certainly more than 10, but not all of them are university-wide. But there are a few with whom we have engaged since many years. Several of them we were founding member, and we all see very much value in them. So with a slogan, I would say we are a proud member of all the university networks we still engage in. Important for us is the complementarity of the activities and of the engagement that are requested by the different types of networks and alliances. And this plays mainly at the level of the involvement of the members of the university in the activities of the network. The engagement of university leadership, so the management board, rector, vice rectors, deans, directors, can be completely different in the different networks. If we think about more specialized science and engineering networks, or networks targeting towards disciplines in the humanities, then it's clear that this is much more focused on content and that academics are strongly involved if they see the purpose of joining the activities of these networks. One other very big difference is the type of activities that are really needed from members of the universities in such a network. If we think about Coimbra or LERU, the League of European Research Universities, for example, but also Universitas 21, which is a global network that we joined recently. There we see that there certainly is an engagement needed of university leadership, because this is more about strategies, about how collaborations are taking shape, how joint perspectives on strategy can be developed, and so on. For some others, and that is probably more what we are envisaging with the European University Alliances, it's much more about the actual activities of a university, being there for the students, coming up with pilot projects on how we can strengthen cooperation at the benefit of what we are doing, enhancing quality, improving excellence of what we are doing in student offerings or in research activities. So that's clearly different types of activities that make it possible to manage all of that. Also, what is quite important is that the level of engagement in all the activities of the different alliances should not be equal. As Emanuele knows, we are not, as KU Leuven, active in all the working groups of Coimbra Group. It's just requiring too much effort, and we also don't want to duplicate tasks of the same people in different networks. There is no need for that. There is also enough overlap between some of the larger European networks, like Coimbra, the Guild, LERU, César and others, so that there is a lot of mediation happening at various levels. So not every individual university should be on top of all different issues in order to still have impact jointly. Maybe one aspect, and this is something we also have to bear in mind when evaluating and dealing with European university alliances like Una Europa, is that what is most important in the end is that all these networks and all the alliances, in first instance, help to build stronger ties with specific universities. So bilateral, trilateral, small groups of universities who on specific topics, specific disciplines can become strategic partners. We usually choose strategic partners within the partners we know well within these networks, or the other way around. Many of the alliances, also the larger networks, have been created because of many existing bilateral strategic partnerships. And yeah, I think this is really a very important issue. If we think, for instance, about how we have been partnering with the universities beyond Europe in Universitas 21, many of those we did not really intensively or very well, but since joining that group only in 2019, we succeeded in developing very strong priority partnerships with a couple of universities in Australia, for instance, or in Latin America. And that really is opportunities that you create and you can then seize whenever you see these opportunities with chances to jump into. I could give a couple of examples where the different networks are very useful for us as KU Leuven, but that's a very limited and one-sided view. But for instance, for Coimbra Group, as Emanuela mentioned already, this historical link of the network of Coimbra Group with the Montevideo Group is opening up lots of opportunities to enhance and strengthen collaboration, network to network, but also university to university in Latin America. And for us, this really is a great opportunity. In Leru, we are very much targeted towards discussing and aligning with like-minded research-intensive universities to talk about our university policy, our innovation agenda, research strategies, and yeah, this has been, I think, extremely important also to influence policymakers at the European and national level, for instance, in issues that are now very high on the EU agenda, like the research assessment and research infrastructure files. So that really is then the network to talk to influence that, of course, in consultation with other networks. And then if we think about the achievements of Una Europa, thank you for calling this one of the leading networks, Vanessa. We sometimes think we are the leading, but that's probably not something I should say, so sorry for that. We certainly have gone beyond what we have done in partnerships with other networks. So institutionally, we really have developed new formats, new models, implemented these things also across borders that we were not able to cross before. And one prime example is the Joint Bachelor on European Studies, which now co-awards with different institutions a degree where students are mobile, going from one place to the other. They can start at 4 different universities and at the end can take part of their program in blended formats, in virtual formats, but also with embedded mobility in the programs. So that's the kind of endeavors for which you really need strong collaboration.
And I think it's been really insightful, Peter, to hear on the one hand how networked collaboration based on your experience opens the door to new networks and new types of collaboration, and at the same time in the multiple networks in which you are already active as an institution, you also have different depths of collaboration with specific partners in that network. So it's both a widening and a deepening at the same time of collaboration. You've spoken of complementarity and also I think about this anchoring of or the rationale behind these collaborations to responding to specific needs, particularly of academics. And that actually leads me to my next question to Juan, who we've deliberately left at the end, again with a student perspective, but also to hear a bit of how do you see the student needs when it comes to institutional collaboration. So what should universities basically know or think of when embarking in such cooperation based on the students' perspective?
Yes, thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here, Irina, with my fellow distinguished panelists. Very, very nice discussion. And actually, I want to start by telling you a bit how did I prepare this intervention, because it's an interesting process. Normally, when I'm invited to speak about the student experience, the student voice, I look at our data sets. In ESN, we collect a lot of data. And I reflect on that and try to come up with conclusions. And actually, when you contacted me about the topic, I thought, actually now I have the opportunity to complement this with something different. And I decided to create a new data set. And we actually launched a new SNAP consultation with our network. We normally have, let's say, these consultations directly with students gathering thousands of answers. But I thought that since most of our ESN sections across Europe are somehow connected with the alliances, it would be interesting to reflect a bit on what are their first perceptions, because these are students that care about the topic, but are not very versed in policy, right? They don't know the nitty-gritty of the European strategy for universities. So the perspective is also very useful for me to kind of build the state of play in terms of the needs of the students. And I think that this, combined with our long-time tradition in collecting student data, especially from students that are interested in internationalization, gives us at least a good picture, a good preliminary picture of some of these needs that the students have. So some initial reflections, and then we can use for the rest of the conversation. The first one, and this is something that they have the opportunity to discuss already with many alliances, is that, and applicable, by the way, not only to the alliances, because all these conclusions go beyond the alliances. I think they are relevant for any kind of institutional collaboration, is that access to opportunities matters a lot to students. When asking the students in our surveys, the tangible access to opportunities that they can feel, that they can see, matters a lot. You know, students want to see how these collaborations are going to result on benefits, on things that will help their learning development, will help their career prospects, will help their interaction with the students. And this is why this idea of opportunities should be understood with a broad perspective. Because through cooperation, within and beyond the alliances, there are many tangible things that we can give to the students, right? We can give, of course, joint degrees, research opportunities, but we can also give maybe more, let's say, basic things that can make a difference in the student experience. And I'm thinking about simple elements like more joint trainings and joint activities in which we bring different members of the academic community together to co-create things, to develop strategies, to reflect on how the university is going. Micro-granting or seed funding, and as some alliances are calling, a fantastic practice that I know some of the alliances are working on, giving small micro-grants to student organizations or even to individual students to implement projects with a transnational perspective. We do this as ESN with Key Action 2 funding. So it's actually doable without an alliance, and it works really, really well. But then also it can be better communication cycles, co-creation processes. So many, many things related to this idea of opportunities that I believe should be considered when creating these cycles. The second thing that I believe is something that it's always good to remind is that improving implementation of existing tools, processes, and systems is also a very big innovation sometimes, you know, like, so working on improving implementation, on making sure that the cooperation that we have also results on better delivery of things that we're already doing is something that matters to the students, right? Many times when we ask students, why do you think that the alliances are going to be a good idea? They tell us, oh, because they will reduce paperwork, because they will improve mobility cycles, they will improve recognition. So actually they see how further collaboration can result on a better implementation of things that we already have. And then something that I believe it relates to the conceptualization of these initiatives, which is the needs-based processes, right? Which are linked to a culture of evaluation in which we do something, we evaluate with our academic community, we involve our stakeholders, and then we come to the next idea. And then going to the final part, you know, of this question is the engagement and outreach dimension. So I think that a great thing that the alliances have brought is that they have brought momentum in terms of communication. We feel it, right? People talk about the newspapers, the students might discuss it, even if people, because it's sometimes hard to grasp, maybe for a person who is not linked with the policy aspects, the full extent of the alliances, people talk about them. And this is what has made Erasmus so great, that everybody knows about it, you know, that people can discuss it. So I think that a very clear strategy in terms of how, as an institution, we are gonna engage with our students, we are gonna interact with different parts of the student body for different purposes, because they might have different interests, because of course students are very different. The people in the student council don't have the same interests as the members of the football club of the university, but the football club can also benefit from the European University Alliance. So I think that this clear strategy in terms of engagement and outreach is extremely important, right? And once again, regardless of the type of collaboration. And I want to link this with the idea of opportunities again, because there is no better engagement strategy than connecting with people directly with a proactive approach, mentioning the opportunities, mentioning what's in it for them and how this is going to contribute to the improvement of their experience. And I think this is the base to create what we like to call maybe a culture of student collaboration, a culture in which, as an institution, in all my processes, I embed student participation and I embed these feedback cycles that then can also improve the delivery of the things that I do. And then just a couple of other points on the tangible relevance, right? I believe that it is clear that these kinds of collaborations are beneficial for students, even if sometimes they don't know. So I believe that that pedagogical dimension of the work of institution is quite important. You know, you need to talk to your students about why this is important for them. And you need to engage them in the conversation, because they might have this kind of, let's say, feedback that then you can include in your project applications, and that's gonna make them stronger. And I want to highlight also something really interesting that came in our own consultation that I was not expecting, right? Because from the EU side, and I think rightly so, there is a lot of focus on the value dimension, right? We talk a lot about why the alliances and other collaborations are so important in terms of fighting for our common values. And the students also mentioned that, to be honest, of course, these are students that many of them have already been on Erasmus, but there was a clear link with the importance of these collaborations to advocate for causes, to really bring about social change, which I believe is something that we should consider, how collaboration should also be linked with societal impact, with reaching out even to different parts of societies, the societal role of universities, how we can use collaboration to advocate for those values, and having the students as partners and co-creators. So I think that with this we have an initial overview, and then also we can continue with the following questions.
It's highly interesting to hear actually from your data collection now that some of the beliefs, I would even say, we have, on the relevance of alliances and networks, network collaboration, have actually reached the students, despite the remaining, I think, challenges that we all know about related to communication. You know that as ACA, we also have this we're a big advocate of data and better data in international education. So yeah, we're happy we could contribute, I think, with these questions to some new perspectives. Well, and now it's time to open up the floor for a first round of questions or comments from your side. So hopefully the discussions so far have sparked some reflections or burning questions. Anyone would like to launch us? All right. Well, maybe it will come. We need to continue, yes. Well, I think we will continue with what is another hot topic at the moment, or question, and several of you have already alluded to that, the question of impact. And evidence of institutional level transformations. And when you were speaking about this evaluation culture that was also brought up from a student perspective, the need to take stock of what we do, and other colleagues have commented, I think, in the morning panel, specifically related to the European Universities Initiative, that the momentum is there, attention is there, but it's also time to show some of the results and document the impact that alliances and in general network collaboration can have. So Vanessa, I will turn to you first. It's a bit of the same question for all of you, but maybe framed more from the European Universities Initiative perspective, given also that, well, we've had, I think, a couple of weeks ago, a study published for the European Parliament, a first study looking into the evolving impact of European universities alliances. European Commission has commissioned a number of studies that are now ongoing on co-funding, but also on the evaluation of initiative as a whole. So it's definitely a topic of attention for you and your unit. What can you tell us? What is there already, and what can we say in terms of transformations?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Irina. Maybe before replying to that question, I don't know how many of the audience are familiar with this initiative as compared to other forms of Erasmus Plus cooperation. It's important to understand that there are different cooperation models through Erasmus Plus. You have the higher education cooperation partnerships, that is the most accessible one for universities to develop their cooperation transnationally, where here you have fantastic academics, passionate, who want to develop a joint degree, a joint program, or common activities to implement. Yeah, very happy that you mentioned our European strategy for universities that we presented last year, and I mentioned before, to accompany the green and digital transition of society. So these are short-term projects, 3-4 years, but that can nevertheless bring a lot of impact in a university. Then we have Erasmus Mundus to develop joint master degrees internationally. We have the Alliances for Innovation, when it comes to reinforcing cooperation with the private sector and to really develop the skills that they need. And then we have the European University Initiative, which is the most ambitious one, where it's a long-term objective. So it's not a short-term objective, but a very long-term. It's like a marriage between the members of the alliance to really transform not a small part of their activities, but it's really objective to transform all activities within the institution. So it's very, very ambitious, and I think it's important to have that in mind when we discuss impact and outcomes. What the study from the European Parliament has shown, and this is one of the main outcomes, is that it is very early to assess at the moment the outcome and the impact, because it's a long-term process. We see already very good outcomes. Actually, we were discussing with Fernando and Dorothy from the Arcus Alliance yesterday that actually in their final report after the 3 years, the outcomes have been exponential as compared to the midterm that came in the middle of the COVID-19. So we're going to analyze all these final reports that the executive agency has just received. We're going to learn a lot. For example, some alliances, one of the objectives is to increase the student mobility. That basically, as you said rightly so, what students want are opportunities, right? And that's so far with Erasmus+, even if we are very happy that we have more than 350,000 mobilities every year, it's still only a very small proportion of the student body. So one of the objectives of these European Universities Alliance is that a large majority of the student body of a university can have access to these opportunities. So we're very happy to see when Una Europa or other alliances develop completely joint transnational degrees. That's fabulous. But it's not enough to reach out a majority of the student body. So we were very happy to see that in some alliances, they have really transformed what exists, meaning that they have embedded mobility in all their bachelor programs, existing bachelor programs. That's fantastic. That gives fantastic opportunities for a large number of students. But of course, on top of that, we're very happy to see joint new degrees, completely new degrees developed between the alliances, where they have not only this mobility, but it's also embedding this challenge-based approach, which means students learning with their peers from different disciplines, different faculties, working on real-life challenge problems that can be submitted by the regions, the cities, the companies within the innovation ecosystem of the universities. For example, I was receiving students from Eurotech, and they organized this hackathon for Eurotech. And it was fabulous to see students from different levels, bachelor, master, PhD, even continuous learners, working together on a very concrete challenge, and they're going to put the outcomes as it will become patented. That's fabulous, and we want to see more of that, because this is these opportunities during their studies that will make students the future leaders, the future entrepreneurs, who will be able to develop the careers, notably in the fields that I was mentioning before, where Europe needs more talents and more skills. So we are, as you mentioned, Irina, developing together with the European universities, together with the member states, a monitoring framework to evaluate the outcomes and the results of this initiative in a long-term perspective, looking at this initiative as a whole. So not alliance by alliance, but what the currently 44 alliances as an outcome are transforming really the higher education landscape. So this, we are now developing the indicators together, and we'll have the outcomes of the analysis next year in a report. But what was fascinating with the discussion that we had in the European Parliament when presenting this study was that the MEPs believe in this initiative. That's very good news. And they ask for more transparent data that we will bring next year. Another element that they said is the need for sustainable funding, because as we said, it's a long-term perspective, and we had the pleasure earlier this week to meet 44 rectors representing these alliances, discussing with our commissioner. So our commissioner explained that we are now with the new funding 4+6 years, we are giving a long-term perspective until 2028, 2029 for all these initiatives, but of course it's really important as well to go beyond that. to make sure that these alliances will continue beyond the mandate of the current college, beyond the mandate of the rectors as well. And so this is why we are going to work on an investment pathway, so to prepare on how we can continue sustaining the funding of these alliances in a long-term perspective beyond 2028, 2029, possibly as well to look at how we can bring even more coherence, even more synergies between different sources of funding, because we know that it's quite challenging for the alliances to apply to so many different European sources of funding. But we know as well how difficult it is to convince member states, the Council, the European Parliament to open up a little bit the funding that they assign to each different strands to then open it up to such joint initiative. But I think we are in different contexts now. When we negotiated and started with that, with the current program, this European Universities Initiative was still on paper, but it did not exist in reality. Now we are in different contexts where they exist. It's very concrete, it's very tangible. So we can be hopeful for the next MFF with this new context, with these existing European universities to put forward a convincing investment pathway that then will need to be negotiated with the Council and the European Parliament. But this is what we are going to work on in the coming years.
I think an important ingredient in this is also that, well, the ones driving, I think, alliances forward are also the true believers. So I think in that sense of hope for what can be achieved also in the next program generation, many of the alliances are also equipped with the right kind of colleagues for such an ambitious endeavor to a certain extent. Juan, again, from a student perspective, when we talk about this question of evidence and outcomes, maybe indeed that's a better word for now. Yes.
Yeah, so I'm going to try to cover a bit, let's say, the other side, right? Because I will mention a bit the alliances as well, but when also thinking a bit about the existing evidence, it is clear to all of us, because we see it all the time, there is a lot of evidence in terms of the impact of Erasmus mobilities. That is easy to find, we all know it, we all promote it. There is evidence on the impact on the individuals, but as you know, there's also a lot of evidence that the European Commission did through the impact study on the impact on institutions and professors, which I think is quite interesting, starting from, as Vanessa said, the most basic form of cooperation, right? Which is, we have key action 2, but even I think that student mobility is the most typical form of cooperation, right? I think that the vast majority of higher education institutions in Europe do it. They are the leaders in the world in terms of exchanges, and this already starts to bring already a transformation in the way in which universities work. I don't think it's a coincidence that universities with higher mobility rates are also universities that are more internationalized in general, right? Normally universities with higher mobility rates also have more cooperation projects, they belong to more networks, etc. So it's a very good way to start, let's say, exploring the field of institutional collaboration. But then there's also available evidence that is, however, a bit old. So this is something that probably we should look, at renewing, which is the systemic impact of these strategic partnerships. Because in the Erasmus Impact Study, there is a particular section on the impact of strategic partnerships on institutions. So also available evidence on how the curriculums are transformed, the way in which universities teach is transformed, the way in which universities also collaborate with their ecosystem, with the stakeholders, is transformed. And then also other things like the cooperation index of EU multi-rank. So we do have some evidence, I would say, but probably now that the discussion about the alliances is also bringing the whole discussion about the different forms of collaboration, it's probably a good moment to evaluate even more the other ways of collaborating. And it is true that we have the fantastic results platform of Erasmus+, like we have their results from the projects, but probably there is a space to do even more research, right? Because as I said before, I mean, we are firm believers in the impact that key action 2 projects can have, simply because we participate every given year in 10, 15, 20 of them, and we see that when they are implemented as part of an institutional strategy, when they are aligned with the objectives of the university, they can bring a very big impact to institutions and therefore to to the students. Because in the end, I think that's a very important thing, that we don't embark on cooperation projects as, let's say, isolated elements, but we do that, you know, as part of a broader strategy in which we connect the dots and we create things that feedback other processes, such as the improvement of student mobility, the improvement of teaching and learning, etc. Then, when it comes to the data that we have, as I said before, there is still not much in terms of general data from the alliances, and also since there is a lack of awareness, that I think it's normal, among the student population of the type of collaborations in which their universities are part of, it is hard to say. But this is a topic in which we're also starting to work more, for instance, with the Coimbra group, in which we started last year an initiative in which we bring together our local liaison sections with Coimbra group universities. This is also a way to disseminate the collaboration, right? To make students understand that their universities are part of networks, alliances, and that this has value in and of itself. Because I think it's really important not to assume that students always understand the importance of academic collaboration if that is not explained to them. Because it's not something that you live normally in there today. And by the way, this is why the alliances are so important, because they are bringing collaboration across the whole academic body, you know, like to all the levels of education, to all the type of initiatives in which the students engage. So what are our plans? Now we continue to collect data with this SNAP survey that we told you about, and it's working really well. We have already more than 60 responses from sections across Europe. So this is going to be a way to first test the waters in terms of the student perception of the alliances collaboration. But then what we want to do is to incorporate more questions related to the alliance in the normal cycle of our ESN survey, which is basically the largest student-led data collection in terms of internationalization, student mobility, etc. So the ESN survey will be launched in June. We'll have June and July data collection, and we want to start incorporating these kind of questions. First of all, to see if the students know that alliances exist, right, the general student population, but also to see if they draw the connections between their mobility, the quality of their experience, and the belonging to the alliance. So I think this is going to be a process that can also feed in the report that the Commission has commissioned, and it's always that we always do, and I want to thank Vanessa for that, is to kind of compare, right, our own data and the data in the Commission, so we have these kind of policy dialogues that I believe are quite important. So basically, in that regard, also in terms of the evidence and the impact, I want to mention something really important that's happening in the alliances, and I think it's one of the most beautiful things, which is that, let's say, the strong innovation and co-creation mandate that the alliances are given to their students is also fostering bottom-up innovations. And we see examples of this, for instance, in ESN. Recently, I was contacted by a couple of alliances, a couple of sections involved in the alliances, telling me that they wanted to create their own, let's say, ESN section for the alliance. Right? So without me telling them, without me, directing them, without ESN International interfering, even student associations are getting together and creating their own bottom-up networks to interact with the alliances. So this is also a clear impact. Bottom-up internationalization processes in which you don't necessarily have the Commission or international student organizations directing what needs to happen, but you create the conditions and you give the students and the whole academic community the mandate to create things. And this is a development that I would like to see happening more and more often, because I think it's one of the most promising things of the alliance. So I think this is a bit the picture that we have, but hopefully next time we meet, we will have even more evidence to discuss.
Yes, and I'm actually convinced of that, and I'll use this example of alliances again, just because I've experienced it as such as well. And to reinforce your point as well, the last one, Juan, I think the fact that there was a wish and objective for student participation in alliances, and maybe precisely because it didn't work, in an optimal way in all cases, but that provided a good testing ground for now in the second round of applications to really optimize student representation and student participation, and to have a more structural role for students in the future shaping of alliances. And I've seen quite a number of examples from the institutions and alliances I work with, where it is indeed precisely ESN sections presidents quite often and ESN representatives on the ground that are actually the ones driving these developments. So there are many synergies there. Yeah, to core internationalization activities beyond those necessarily fostered by the corporations. Let's hear a bit from the institutional perspective, briefly as well, Peter. turning to you. You've already mentioned this process of annual evaluations of your network participation. So how does the question of evidence and outcomes play into that?
Yeah, well, there were no questions about the first question from the audience, so let me be a bit more provocative here. I'm not so much convinced that the next thing to do really is to start quantifying what the alliances are achieving. If this is going to be the exercise, then I think at least one should take into account that all of the networks are completely different. So there is different scale, different focus, different way of cooperation, and that's fine because we are different higher education institutions, and we over the last centuries. Our university, almost 6 centuries now, have been transforming and developing our universities in an international scale. Just two comments to start with. If we think about Erasmus, the Desiderius Erasmus Rotterdamus, he has given the name to the program of Erasmus+. He was a scholar and he was traveling around Europe. He has been in Paris, in Leuven, in Cambridge, in Oxford, in Torino, in Venice, probably other places, to teach and to develop scholar activities with his peers, with his colleague professors. So essentially this is research mobility. And of course, education then follows, but we should not forget that most of our universities really are co-developing their research agenda and their educational agenda. So bringing this together and succeeding doing that more and better is, I think, a much more valuable output of European collaboration or university collaborations, also in the European University Alliances, than just counting enhanced mobility. Then about counting mobility, with the 500,000 students that we have in Una Europa, we really cannot expect that this 500,000 will travel around and stay only within the 11 partner institutions, 9 within EU27 and Edinburgh and Zurich outside of EU27. So this will not happen. When we look into mobility and creating new opportunities for mobility, I think it's much more important to develop schemes that we can use to enhance mobility of students, young researchers, professors, professional staff, with all our partners, so beyond Una Europa. So these are also measures that really should be taken into account and are very, very difficult to really quantify from a European university perspective. So that, I think, really should be points of attention. Now, that being said, I do think that what we have now with Una Europa, and I've seen brilliant examples of the other alliances as well, is an opportunity to really try out things that we have not done before. I already mentioned the joint degree. That's only for a couple of hundred of students every year and may grow if we have more of these degrees. It's spectacular, I think, to have these joint degrees already at bachelor level. Some people, some young people also from beyond Europe really are very much interested in that, and that makes Europe very attractive for students from all over the world. And that's, I think, one of the initial ideas that President Macron had when he was starting this initiative. So that's fine. But maybe another good example would be to look on what we can jointly develop in the framework of lifelong learning. So being open to all of the citizens of Europe. We already now developed a couple of sets of courses, mainly online, not only online, some also blended, targeting a variety of learners, where we bring professors together to jointly develop a set of courses with a couple of electives on sustainability, on data science and AI, on the impact of AI on society. So very important questions where education of a broader population and not only university students is key. And to certify that, to give credits to that, really is an important aspect. Another issue of transformation, for instance, could also be to really take steps forward with respect to recognition of credits. we have been running a pilot program where we were using blockchain technology to automatically recognize credits that were taken on a mobility. This is now ready. I mean, it's an app that can be scaled up, can be used by all institutions. Of course, it requires a little bit of work, but once in use, it will reduce a lot of the administration and the paperwork that we typically have in recognition, because you really secure the data and bring this out. That's a kind of initiative that you can only do if you find partners who are brought together, bring their experts together and solve the question and come with a solution. And once it's there, it's to the service not only of the Una Europa universities in this case, but also much beyond, and ready to be picked up then maybe with better ideas of other alliances and leading to new opportunities. Maybe if I just make one more short remark. If we talk about transformation of higher education, of universities and university colleges, I think we should also be careful in seeing or in evaluating the dynamics that is behind it. If we are now in this era of time or talking about transformations in higher education, it's not a goal on itself. It's a logical step where higher education is following the evolutions in society. We see many things happening around us with emerging technologies, with globalization, with complex political issues, with probably the challenge for Europe and the Western world to really defend European values and human rights. So this is society developing, and I think what we are doing as universities is adapting to that. And alliances are not the reason why we are transforming, but just a very good means to help us transforming in the way that we probably would have done also without this and other initiatives.
Yes, thank you, Peter. Many interesting insights, and I think, in a sense, the key to that was that many of the things that are most essential are not necessarily quantifiable, and I took from your examples also the most valuable, if I understand well, from an institutional perspective, is this innovative potential and innovative approaches, and of course we don't yet have even methodologies for that. Emmanuel, you seem to be in agreement with many of the points that Peter was making. Anything to add?
Yeah, you're stealing my words, actually, because I very much echo what Juan and Peter have just said. So maybe if we come back to this initial distinction between the traditional networks and these new alliances, if I look at the Coimbra Group, the impact is, of course, manifold, widespread, and probably difficult also to capture, because it's not really our objective to assess this type of impact, and there's absolutely no transformational goal here, but there is evidence of the impact of the collaboration between our members. If you look at figures, as instance, about 60% of the Erasmus mobilities across Europe take place from or to a Coimbra Group university. If you look at the success of our members in the European Universities Initiative, if you look at the fact that they have created together a joint scholarship program for researchers from all over the world. So there is evidence of this impact. But if we come back to these new alliances, and with our perspective as associated partner in already 5 and soon probably 6 of these alliances, I would totally echo what Peter has just said, and this is what we bring into the meetings we have with the Commission on the co-creation of this monitoring framework. When we discuss with our members about the impact, we never talk about figures. We never talk about the number of joint master programs developed here or there, or we never talk about quantities. We always talk about qualitative developments, and what the feedback we receive is that this impact is both localized in the sense that it's happening within each university involved in the alliances. This impact is also happening between the universities involved in the alliance, and it's also happening beyond. We have not discussed this now, but I've received feedback from our alliances that there's also a strong impact on suddenly some big names in the private sector becoming aware that there is here something very strong, with a very strong potential, and they are starting new types of collaboration with the alliances just because of this transformational impact. There are some alliances which have seen municipalities of the universities where they are based starting new types of projects that they did not develop in the past. So the impact will be difficult to capture, is still fragmented because we are still in the making, but this impact is already there. So I would also come back to the last point made by Peter. Hopefully in this impact assessment we'll not stick to the static picture of the half empty or half full glass. Hopefully we will look at how the glass is filling up. It's very important to assess the impact in terms of trends and process and not fixed numbers. If you allow me to, other points that have not been mentioned yet neither. In terms of impact, what we are seeing across the different alliances where we're involved is the spillover effect of international cooperation. Until very recently, international cooperation in the universities, when we talk about transnational higher education cooperation, was somehow a reserved domain, reserved competence of international offices. And the transformational impact here with the alliances is that you will be surprised, but sometimes we are contacted here because some of our members involved in alliances would like to connect their financial service department, the IT service of this financial services department, with any other across our membership, the human resource department of universities, the communication departments. Some of our colleagues in our universities would say, involved in the alliances will say, my collaborators, my daily colleagues, they are not based in my universities, they are spread across Europe. So it means that this transnational cooperation has become something much more embedded in the whole institution than it has been over these past years. And this is something very important. At the same time, if we look at the half empty glass, I totally subscribe to what Juan has said. Until now, it's been also the effort of small, enthusiastic group of people that have worked like crazy over these past 3 years. And if we want to ensure sustainability, we really need to ensure that more and more academics become involved, directly engaged with the alliance, and we also need to ensure the institutional integration of the results of the alliances. Thank you.
Thank you as well. Many interesting points to pick up on, but I'm watching a bit the time, and we have, I think, just over 5 minutes left from the panel. So this is a final opportunity, turning to you now for questions and comments, and we do have one there from Ragnhild and Matteo. Yeah.
Thank you, and my name is Ragnhild Berg. I'm from the Norwegian Directorate for Higher Education and Skills. Thank you so much for very interesting input and provoking many reflections, I think, also for many of us. I'm not sure to whom directly I'm asking, but one of the things I'm thinking about, because I think it's pretty clear for what you tell and what we also observe around us, is that this initiative certainly has transformed the way we think about international higher education in Europe. Definitely, and there were many very interesting examples of things coming out of it, and the way the universities within the alliances work together. I'm still a bit worried about universities not taking part in the alliances. Of course, as you said, Vanessa, there were many opportunities for getting funding for working together, but still I can't help having the feeling that for some universities not involved in the alliances, it's a bit like looking from outside inside to the party of everything going on and all these things. So I'm wondering, when you talk about investments also for the future, which I think it's completely right, if you want to have these long-term effects, you need you need the investments also for the future, but how can you secure that also those other universities are not lagging behind and also can somehow take part in these important transformations? I don't have an answer, so this is really just a question. Thank you.
We'll take the question from Matteo as well, because time is short, and then we're going to try to answer the two of them together. Please, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. And I would also re-underline this because also it's a bit of the ambiguity of the term European universities. So who are the ones outside of the club, let's say not European, but only national. But so I'm very much interested in the answer. From my question is the following. Since we're talking, I would even talk in this case of transnationalization instead of internationalization of when we are talking about this kind of spillovers, but one of the elements is, for instance, the social dimension. And if we are taking this bold approach that European universities are the university of the future, then also we should start to talk about a common social dimension policy for what regards the alliances. And this is already a thing, I would say, for what regards the joint degrees. And now we also had there is also the call for the pilot European degree label, for instance, where they say this common policy is actually one of only of the not compulsory but advice criteria. So I was actually interested in knowing how it worked for the program studies, especially for the bachelor, that Una Europa has developed for what regards tuition fees and admission procedures and scholarships.
Thank you. Peter, we can give you the floor. Yes.
Yeah. I'll come to the answer to your question, but if you want to know all the details of developing this degree, we need another hour, I think. Maybe about all the universities who are not member of the university alliances. This is kind of what I had in mind talking about the transformative power that we can develop within the alliances, but which should be there for all our partnerships, and I think everything that we try to do within the alliances should be, in a sense, easily scalable towards other dimensions and towards other disciplines and other universities. So in the case of KU Leuven, we have something like 2,700 partnerships with universities of different faculties and schools with a variety of partners. That's much more than what we have within the Una Europa Alliance. And we need all of them. So I'm sure that if we develop a framework for more opportunities, creating novel formats, we will use them for all our mobilities and all our interactions. About the funding, what we are doing within the alliances really needs funding, and I think what we also should take in mind is that if we want to continue, we really have to work also on the integration between research and education. So this is really a message that we want to resonate quite often, Vanessa. It has to happen, because this is where we really are making progress if we can reach to that. About the complexity that we encountered setting up the European or our joint degree on European studies. Essentially what we have done is working with existing legal frameworks in the different member states, leading to the fact that we only have 4 universities participating in the degree that can jointly award the degree. 4 others were left out, and with our new partners in Una Europa, we will run in very similar problems. So it is currently kind of impossible to match all the legal frameworks of the different member states. And if there is one thing that we should do at European level is to transfer some of the competence of education towards Europe when it concerns international collaboration. This could be a simple modification of allowing exceptions in different member state legal frameworks, but we need to take this step if we really want to make this happen, and if we finally will be able then to reach all the goals of the Bologna process.
Thank you. Vanessa?
Yes, thanks a lot, Irina. I will try to complement the very good answer from Peter from a European perspective. So from the very start, this European Universities Initiative has never been sold as something for everybody. Yeah? As I explained before, it's highly ambitious, it's a long-term perspective. Peter has been kind enough to not say how much additional budget they invest in it as well. We know that the European funding is not enough, so it's huge investment. It's not for everybody. And we are very thankful to have so many universities so enthusiastic, putting all the passion to really go in that direction. Now, for which result? The objective is to have enough critical mass, and that is why we're aiming at 60 European Universities Alliances by mid-2024, to have the critical mass to transform the higher education landscape together with the Council, together with the Member States. That will impact the entire higher education sector and all higher education institutions. If I take two examples, I would take the example of a joint European degree that has been proposed in the European strategy for universities. We'll start with a joint European degree label. Yesterday, or the day before, our commissioner presented, together with Rector Luxels and Minister Glatini, they presented the results of this Erasmus Plus pilot project, where we are going to test, to explore the feasibility of a joint European degree label and different possible scenarios for a joint European degree. And this will not only be for European universities, but for all higher education institutions across Europe to facilitate the delivery of joint European degrees. We know that there are many different joint programs, but when it comes into delivering a joint European degree, and Peter will say it because not all the members of the alliances could be part of the first joint European bachelor, simply because the national legislations is not ready in all the countries. So there is still a lot of work to do for that. And to be able to do that, some alliances will need a legal status, some others not. It's nothing compulsory, it's fully voluntary. But this is also another instrument that will help structuring even more the higher education landscape for deeper transnational cooperation. To be able to develop this, we need as well that the careers of academics are much more recognized, that all the investment that they put in developing micro-credentials, as you mentioned before, to develop these joint European degrees or joint activities for the benefit of students, to offer them more opportunities, this needs to be more recognized in the career path of academics. We are working on that. You mentioned automatic recognition as well. Building this trust is so essential. So you see that this initiative, our objective with this initiative is to really transform even more structure, bring more coherence in the entire higher education sector across Europe that will benefit all higher education institutions and not only those taking part in this initiative.
Half a minute to Juan and then half a minute to Emmanuel for some final remarks.
Yes, okay, no, for me, because I think this is a very valid concern and it's an important discussion across the sector, but I think we should actually take a step back already and think, okay, what is the percentage of universities that are highly engaged in other types of cooperation? It's not that high. I think that we should use the momentum of the alliances to boost all kinds of international cooperation. And this leads me to the very important point of also rethinking, since we are hosted by ACA, the role of national internationalization agencies, not only as administrators, but having a key role steering international policy in the member states. That is fundamental. That is probably the most transformative shift that we can achieve, which is to really beef up the powers of national funding agencies, like it already happens in some member states, so they can do policy. Because then they can do outreach, they can have discussions with their higher education institutions, not only about the beneficiary model, etc., but actually about, are you part of a network? What is your portfolio? Do you have your needs analysis in terms of internationalization? So this is, I think, the narrative that we need to push, more using the momentum to increase international cooperation. I was discussing with colleagues on the Commission that there are so far even less applications for Key Action 2, less people applying for Key Action 2 still. So, the success rate has increased, if I'm not wrong. That means that there's still opportunities that need to be used because you can do a lot with other tools. And I believe this is a narrative that we need to push more and more offering support, offering more guidance, rethinking out risk structures, etc.
I think when there's a big quiet clap from our colleagues in national agencies in the audience, because I think we think very much along on the role that agencies can play also further in this transformation process. Emmanuel, briefly.
So to come back to the question of ranking, I think the diversity is really also a key word. The university sector, higher education sector is very diverse, and we need that diversity of support measures. Community of practices, because this is what really we can see within our network. I'm thinking about there's already some scientific papers on the lessons learned from the European Universities Alliances. I'm thinking about Charmiu, who have recently published on the best practices from transnational hybrid classrooms, and by belonging to communities of practices or networks, you become impregnated from the lessons or what does not work from the alliances. A last word maybe about the asymmetrical efforts between the Commission, where indeed at EU level we can see a momentum for this initiative, and the national level, because not all member states are co-funding, not all member states take it as strategic as others, and we can see, for instance, a very concrete example with the newly selected alliances this year. They are all coordinated by Spain, and Spain decided to give top-up money for the universities that would coordinate the alliances. So asymmetrical efforts also.
Thank you. It's always difficult to bring these sessions to a close because, it always feels, at least on my side as moderator, that we have much more ground to cover. Maybe that is not only bad news, but also good news. It means, yes, we can also leave some things for our next year's edition of the seminar. So I want to warmly thank you for your input, and I'll take one more minute just to do a final round of thanks. It's been really a great pleasure for us as ACA to be able to return with what we consider our flagship event of the year in an on-site format again after the pandemic. We've experimented with different formats, as those of you that were there might know, but this is the format I think that we very much prefer. So we're very happy we could finally meet again in person. We've had some colleagues that followed us online, so we're very glad to have had them also for the plenary sessions. And nice opportunity to see many known colleagues and friends in the audience, but also many new ones coming to our event. So thank you for joining. A big round of thanks to our speakers from the two days, and for your very valuable contributions. To our colleagues here from the venue that supported us also on the technical side. And last vote of thanks from my side to my colleagues in the ACA team. You've seen many of them throughout the different sessions, but actually the biggest thanks go to our colleague in the back, Courtney Hartzell, who is our communications officer. She's never in the spotlight. But she's the one behind everything that happens on site and in preparation of the event. And our colleague Martin Bogdan, who had to leave already, but who's been coordinating our program for this year. So thank you all for joining. Safe travels back for those that have to return. For those that are not in a rush, we still have a lunch on site if you have time to join us for wrapping up. And hope to see you again soon. Stay safe. Thank you.